right, guys, super excited to be chatting to this next man. He's been staying busy, the director of fighter operations for PFL Europe, and so much more. Big PFL things going down, of course, this weekend in Chicago, Saturday here in Australia, Friday in the US. Names like Fabian Edwards, Phil Davis, Sergio Pettis, all on the card. It's all happening with PFL. And I got him back here on the program to talk about PFL and more. Dan Hardy doing a bit of a road trip all around America.
Yeah, it's taken us a while to connect, hasn't it, my friend? We've been messaging back and forth. Yeah, we flew into Nashville for the first event of the semifinals. That was really good, and then we drove on to Wichita, stopped off in a couple of places, and then on to Chicago. And we saw a couple of states I've not visited. I've never been to Nebraska, never been to Iowa, and obviously the Miletich camp made that place famous. So I kind of felt like I knew all the places I was passing through. It was a lot of fun. And yeah, now we're in Chicago. So we've got one more semi-final event, all the big boys, and then on to the finals in August.
I'll tell you, man, it must be funny when you go through some of these little towns. Do you ever have someone like in a bar or a pub being like, oh my God, it's Veronica and Dan Hardy? Like just like in our little town having a beer, playing pool. Have you had many of those moments?
Yeah, we've had a few actually. It's amazing how far the podcast reaches, because I mean we have quite a niche audience, I'd say. We have about 30,000 people that tune in regularly, and you just don't know where those people are going to be. And obviously, people remember me from UFC commentary and fights, and watching Veronica now, competing. We never know who's going to recognize us. It always surprises us, to be honest. But it's a lot of fun, But even so, everywhere you go, especially the places we've visited, places like Paducah, Kentucky. Des Moines, Iowa, Omaha, Nebraska. Everybody's treated us like they know us anyway. It's been a lot of fun to meet people. So yeah, not only have we had great fights, but it's been a great road trip as well.
What was your reaction? I'm guessing you were probably on the road when you saw the fact that Jon Jones is retired after we've been basically waiting almost a year for him to fight Tom Aspinall.
I was not surprised, to be honest. I didn't expect us to get this fight anyway. I mean, I think we've discussed it before. It was, I try and look at it from Jon Jones's perspective. He achieved so much, right? Why would he then, have the lasting memory of his career? Him getting starched by Tom Aspinall in a round. Unfortunately, you remember what it did to Aldo's career. A lot of people forgot how awesome Aldo was after the McGregor knockout. It was almost like he was a disposable fighter, and I guess that's the way the sport's kind of changed in the last few years. There is a very, very quick recycling process, especially when they don't seem to be many more fights left in your future, perhaps. And I think Jon's legacy, unfortunately, is going to be affected by this, because it will define how people remember him at the end of his career. And the thing is, he's such an incredible talent, right? Regardless of your opinions of him as a person and what's gone on outside of the cage. Like I spent time with him at autograph signings and all kinds of things when we were sponsored by Zions early on in his career. Mm-hmm. And I mean, maybe I know he's always been awesome. He was always great with the fans. He's always been, in a good mood. I mean, of course, he's the main character in his movie, and everybody else is in his movie when he walks into the room. And that's something that a lot of people, I don't think we really fully understand, because not many people get to experience that. I mean, if you think about combat sports, you've got Floyd Mayweather, Conor McGregor, Mike Tyson. He's in that very, very elite group of people who their life has just been surreal for so many years that it's difficult for us to understand his perspective on the world. But I think, looking in from a fan from the outside, that the aftertaste of his retirement is that he didn't want to fight Tom Aspinall. And I think it's unfortunate, because I don't want it to undermine everything else that he achieved, because he is such a great fighter and changed so much about the sport in the way that he competed.
It's a crazy one, right? Because, for example, GSP, when he won that belt against Michael Bisping, even though he said he would defend it, vacated the belt, exit stage left, and see you guys later. And people at least appreciated him being like, look, I'm not fighting like Robert Whittaker, blah, blah, blah. I'm done. Like, this is it. Jon Jones held onto this belt and trolled fans for about a year. Will he? Won't he? Will he? 200,000 people signed a petition. He's in Thailand. He's doing this. He's doing that. Do you think ultimately Jon Jones made a mistake of not just vacating the belt, letting the division move on, and then, when he's ready to come back, come back? I just feel like with fans, this whole trolling, this whole year, this whole sport being in limbo and the division not moving and Tom being this interim champion, I think for a lot of fans, that leaves a really sour taste in their mouths. Him having to fight Stipe when no one really wanted to see him fight Stipe. It just kind of didn't really leave a great taste in their mouths as things were wrapping up.
No, I agree with all of that. I mean, I wonder if things would have been different if the UFC was in a different point of negotiations with their rights, because you look at where they're at right now and their pay-per-view draws. Even if they moved away from the pay-per-view model, you've still got those standout stars, and I would say that a couple of them obviously have fallen away recently, and the ones that they kind of seem to be clinging on to a little bit, one of them being Jon Jones, the other one is kind of Conor McGregor. We don't expect to see him fight again either, but I think both of those names play into the negotiation rights and the strength of the UFC product moving forward. So I think that's played a lot into this as well, which, has probably put Jon Jones in an awkward predicament where, maybe he did want to retire earlier. Maybe he was asked to stick around for a period of time, and, or maybe the negotiations were just ongoing back and forth. These things, I'm on the other side of negotiations now, and it's not like a one conversation thing. People go back to their camps and they discuss, and it can take a week or two before you get a reply. So, who knows who was dragging their feet and why? It's just a shame that this is kind of the way that, Jon Jones' career is effectively wrapped up. The right thing to do would have been to beat Stipe and then to be like, look, I'm not ready to be full-time active. Let Tom step into the position and be the undisputed champion. And then if I decide to come back at some point, I will do. I think that would have been a better thing to do. But I also think that, Jon likes to be the champ. There's a lot of value to him as a brand if he's got the belt around his waist and he is the legit champ. And, with Dana celebrating him constantly, pound for pound best, two people walk into a room, who walks out? How many times have we heard that? Jon's effectively been coasting on those words for a little while as well, and it's probably making him a lot of money, and that will all change within a matter of months, maybe years if he's lucky, if he's not an active fighter.
Yeah, it's funny because Dana White, the fight's done, it's a done deal, it's happening. Can you confirm the fight's happening, Dana White? The fight's happening. Blah, 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 blah. And then out of nowhere in Fanatics, the fight's not happening. It was done, but it's not happening. Let me quickly ask you this, Dan, just the elephant in the room on this retirement. Obviously, like Jon Jones, problems with the law going back all the way to 2019. The retirement comes out, then we find out there's more issues, more criminal issues. Body cam footage comes out today. It's another situation. It's all alleged, of course, but from the body cam footage, you can allegedly hear Jon Jones speaking over the phone. It's a woman who says he fled another scene of an accident, allegedly. Of course, you're innocent until proven guilty, but coming out right after the retirement with the history that he's had already. What do you think that does to legacy? Does that do anything to legacy? Does that count into legacy? Yeah, it's a weird one, right?
I don't know. What I want to say is, yeah, it's bad for his legacy. It's bad for his reputation. It's going to cast him in a bad light, and et cetera, et cetera. But look at the people that are unfortunately rising to the top at the moment. They're not the most savory of characters. I don't know. The other thing as well is I don't know what's AI and what's not anymore. So I always kind of hang back on judgment and stuff. But I said it earlier, Jon is the main character in his video game, in his movie. We're all extras, and if you're playing Grand Theft Auto, you don't worry too much about running over a couple of pedestrians. I don't know. He's living such a surreal life. It's difficult for any of us to really fully understand his perspective of the world. Like I said, I think he's in a very elite, very small handful of people who live an incredibly surreal life. And there are very few of those from combat sports. And I think Jon is one of them.
Mm. It's one of those crazy things. It's like almost like John's biggest opponent in his whole career has just been himself, right? Like, and we've seen that with guys who are just so good that it's almost, you know what I mean? Like, there's no challenges out there, and that must be a crazy situation. All right, so now we have Tom Aspinall. What have you made of everybody sort of bringing Francis Ngannou up with Dana White, and Dana White just shutting it down, like no interest in Francis, doesn't want to work with him, blah, 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 blah. You look at one guy here in Jon Jones, again, remarkable career, but all of these issues, right? Like PED issues, having to move cards. Was a UFC 200 in the media room when the event got cancelled last second and they had to bring in Anderson Silva. And you got Francis Ngannou here, who just kind of wanted a fair deal for fighters and a fair deal for himself. And Dana White's like, no, I will never work with this man again. What do you make of him, like, discounting Francis Ngannou to such an extreme over just the fact that their negotiations didn't work out? Because that's the fight that everybody wants to see. Tom Aspinall and Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that is the fight that everyone wants to see. And, and I saw I can't remember what media outlet posted it up earlier today, but it was, who do you want to see Tom Aspinall fight? And, there's some decent options. I mean, Cyril Gane or Curtis Blades, but they just don't, it's not what you want from a heavyweight fight. Like you want that feeling, and I don't get it. I get it from Tom Aspinall, and I would have got it from Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones. I didn't get it from Jon Jones versus Stipe. I got it from Jon Jones versus Daniel Cormier. That they're the kind of fights where like you kind of get that excitement of like, oh my goodness, like what is going to happen? And there are very, very few, especially at heavyweight MMA fighters that tick that box. And Francis Ngannou is definitely one of those. Like that would be an incredible matchup to see him and Tom Aspinall, especially because we know how well-rounded Tom Aspinall is, and we've not really needed to see a great deal of his game. And every time I see Francis Ngannou out there, he surprises me with something. So, I expect them to bring the best out of one another. And as far as Dana goes, I mean, he's unfortunately that person, and because he's got so much power in the sport, he dictates so much of what we consume, what the fans think and feel and see on their screens all the time. So, unfortunately, he is known to hold a grudge. But at the same time, he is also known to say, this will never happen. And then next thing, Ronda Rousey's got a UFC belt around her waist. Things can shift gears very quickly, and money dictates a lot of those gear shifts. So, it wouldn't surprise me if we see that fight at some point in the future. And I certainly hope so.
Yeah, obviously he's with the PFL. You guys have the big PFL Africa thing coming up soon as well. But like you've always sort of mentioned it, and I'm sure like Don Davis as well and the team at PFL would be open to, coming up with some kind of deal where you guys have, Francis, and then the UFC comes on board and brings in Tom Aspinall, and it becomes this massive fight. Like we've just seen Canelo, the big Netflix fight coming up. That's big. That's a big fight. Like you could almost create that on a Netflix or another kind of big broadcaster type thing coming together for this one night only heavyweight, once in a lifetime stadium fight between Tom and Francis. Maybe like what massive stadium in the UK, like what Tyson Fury does for his, like this could be a spectacle, once in a lifetime. Like I'm wearing my George Foreman top, because you wear these tops because even after the fight is long gone, you just remember those, oh, he came back. This was a once in a lifetime fight that everyone had to wake up and watch, and you had your son there and your kids. So do you think there's any situation that the UFC would be willing to speak with you guys or work with you guys to make this fight happen? Or do you believe it's just UFC will never co-promote with anybody else no matter what?
Again, I don't want to pull a Dana White and never say never, but I think there's possibilities for co-promotion. I do, because back in the Zuffa days when it was Dana calling all the shots, everything was the way that Dana wanted it. But now there is a bit of flexibility. There are other people that have an opinion, and the money will dictate what that opinion is. And I do think that there's room for some promotion. Like imagine this. Imagine just, and I'm literally thinking off the top of my head right now, so I'm probably going to talk a bunch of nonsense, but imagine we just bring Pride back for one show, right? We do neutral territory. Everybody loves Pride. We could even do it in a ring with the blue gloves or something. But Tom Aspinall versus Francis Ngannou would be absolutely mouth-watering. Like I feel like we need to get back to those spectacular fights, those spectacular events. I've been at a few of them, and they, I can count them on one hand. We miss that in mixed martial arts because the brand always precedes the fighters. It's always about, this is the brand, this is the number of the event, and not about this fighter. And like, that's the beauty of boxing. And I hope that we don't lose that in the way that boxing promotion is being changed, because like, you're wearing the name of a fighter on your shirt. You're not wearing the name of a promotion, right? We don't even have walkout shirts anymore. Like, the fighter's name's on the back, like vertical. Like, it's like, I like the custom shorts they're doing, but I feel like the UFC has kind of stripped the soul out and the character out of the sport in a lot of ways. Like, this is a much longer conversation to have. I mean, this is probably worthy of a podcast, to be honest. And I could probably write a dissertation on it and the negative effects of this and that and blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to put too much of a downer on it, but we've certainly lost a lot of that flexibility in the sport, which once made it very, very, exciting. And I think we could get some of that back. And the fight to do it is Ngannou, Tom Aspinall. And you know full well that Tom wants to get behind it because he wants to prove himself. And Jon Jones is not the person that he's going to be able to do it against. So the next best person really is going to be Francis Ngannou. There's nobody on the UFC roster that could do it. And one more thing I'll say, Don Davis is the Willy Wonka of PFL. He's mad and we love him. And you know full well that if you can get him excited about a fight, he will do whatever he can to make it happen. And that is the fight that he wants to see.
It's funny as well because, again, probably Dana White would never go for it. You never know. But Jon Jones probably still fights if there was a way that they could have done a Jones-Ngannou fight with you guys, right? Like, he wanted to fight Ngannou, apparently. That could have been the fight that keeps him around. So now retired, so we don't get to see him fight because he just thinks Tom Aspinall is an asshole. But just quickly, before we move off the heavyweight division, what would your reaction be if they just move up Alex Pereira and do this Aspinall-Pereira fight rather than Gan or Almeida? Would you be interested in that, or do you think Gan or Almeida is the next fight to do?
I don't mind the Cyril Gan and the Almeida fight. I don't mind them. They don't, like I said, they don't excite me like I want a heavyweight fight to excite me, and especially with it being Tom Aspinall's first like legitimate title defense. But then at the same time, I don't see Pereira as a heavyweight. I mean, you've got to remember, like, Pereira was 185, although very, very briefly he stepped on the scales at 185. Like, Tom Aspinall's not been 185 since he was about 12. Like, there is a considerable size difference between the two. And I know that Pereira punches like a truck, but heavyweights take punches like trucks. And I don't know, is that size of Tom Aspinall would be able to be overcome, even with someone like Pereira. I mean, you go back to his last fight in Glory against Artem Vakitov, and I would say I've never seen them stand side by side, but Artem Vakitov is not the same kind of size or species of fighter that Tom Aspinall is, let's be honest. And Tom Aspinall has got a mad ground game as well to couple with that size. Like, does Alex Pereira beat a prime Frank Mir? I don't know as he does. I think Frank takes him down and probably snaps a limb. And I think Tom Aspinall is probably more capable as an MMA fighter given his striking skills. It looks, that to me seems like we're like clutching at straws a little bit because there's not a better option. And like Pereira as a light heavyweight, even better, move Jon Jones back down to light heavyweight and have him fight Pereira in a retirement fight. Because, he wants to fight Pereira, but he can't do it at heavyweight. It just doesn't make sense. If there's a fight to make with Pereira, it's against Jon Jones. But then that would absolutely make it look like he's running away from Tom Aspinall.
All right, guys, before I get back to the interview, I just want to thank my sponsor, Manscaped, for making this program possible. Did you guys know with a code word submission, you guys could save 15% off? That's 15% off plus free shipping from all of the great products on the Manscaped website, but I want to talk to you guys about the Chairman Pro. The Chairman Pro is a high-tech, dad-approved grooming upgrade, which is perfect for the Father's Day over there in America. But if it's not Father's Day, it is an electric face shaver that can tackle up to 5 days of growth and features 2 interchangeable blade heads. It's waterproof. The battery life is awesome, up to 75 minutes of runtime on a single charge, but it also showcases the battery level so you know when it's time to recharge with the display. Of course, it's got the travel lock, the LED spotlight, and most importantly, the 2-year warranty the Manscaped comes with. Manscaped, of course, has the Lawnmower 5.0, the Beard Hedger, and all sorts of other products. Some of the most comfortable underwear out there as well. So go to manscaped.com, use the code word submission, get 15% off and free shipping today. And guys, I also want to talk to you about our friends at Saily. That's right, Saily, the best eSIM on the market today. What is an eSIM? Let's say you're traveling, you need to make phone calls, you need to download data, you need to be able to use your phone. Don't line up in a stupid queue and replace your SIM card, lose your current SIM card, and sign up to some plan that lasts for months. Use Saily today. You just have to download the app. You just choose the location where you're at. You choose the amount of data that you want, and you are sorted, my friend, to use your phone wherever you go, whatever country you go to. It's easy to use. Like I said, all you need to do is just download the app. You avoid roaming costs, never ran out of data because you're able to update it and increase it wherever you go. It's one eSIM for all of your trips, so you don't have to change SIMs everywhere you go. And it's got global and regional plans as well. Get up to 100 gigabytes of data or as little as 1 gigabyte of data for a week or half a year. Saily is your place to go for everybody out there who's looking for an eSIM. So download the Saily app now and use the code submission. Go to saily.com/submission. The link is in the description below, and you guys get an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. That's 15% off your first purchase. Try Saily today. And now back to the program. All right, let's talk about PFL, man. Before we go to PFL 7, I just want to get your reaction to Kevin Lee, man. He, bit of a warrior, right? Stepped up for one of the hardest fighters outside of the UFC just the past weekend. And then he shared this message on his Instagram talking about the fact that obviously he got a jaw injury, got his jaw wide shut, but he's proud of obviously everything that he's been. Look at that. After the fight.
You know, I'm proud of what I was able to do during that fight. My jaw might be wired shut. I might be drinking out of a straw, but at least I was able to go out there, test myself. I'm no coward. I ain't never been a coward. My body just gave out on me. My heart was there. I was proud of the way I prepared. I was able to make the weight on short notice, and I was in tremendous shape. But the fight just didn't go the way I expected it to go. My legs just never got underneath me.
So there we got the video from Kevin Lee. Man, what an incredible warrior, right? Like, stepped into the PFL to potentially fight one of the hardest fights out there. I saw people online saying like, oh, dude, you should have taken an easier fight. You should have just negotiated a different fight. And I saw Kevin Lee sort of echo the same statement where it's like, I'm a warrior. I won the biggest challenge. I was going in there to test myself. Like, so much respect for Kevin Lee, right? Like the way he's handled this loss, and also the fact that he was willing to step in there and test himself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when the change of card first popped up in my email account, and I saw that Kevin Lee was stepping in. I mean, I think I felt the same as everybody else. I was anxious for him because, he's had a rough run of late, and you always want to see those kind of fighters to kind of build back in with momentum, but that's just not, unfortunately, how the sport works. Most promotions, especially given the way that the whole industry has just kind of been eaten up, those smaller promotions that can catch a Kevin Lee and rebuild him, they're just not there anymore. And what's unfortunate is that when the opportunities come for people like Kevin Lee that has that name, it's almost always the next up and coming killer. And Magomed Rabidanov is absolutely that. I mean, of course, it's a great opportunity for him. He's made a good, he's added a good name to his record, and he's progressed to the finals, and people obviously are very, very high on him to win. He's matched against Alfie Davis in the final, which should be a spectacular matchup. But I look at someone like Kevin Lee, and I look at some of the other guys, across our roster and the old Bellator roster, and the UFC roster as well. I think we all felt the same when Nate was matched against Chimaev. You're like, I kind of don't want to see this. I want to see him against the Tony Fergusons, and for me, I think that's the direction that the sport has to go. We're always in new territory because MMA is young, and we've got this catchment of fighters right now that are perhaps a little bit older in their career, but have still got a lot more to give. And if they're matched right, they can have some really fun fights for the fans. And the other thing as well is, like, people forget Kevin Lee's 32, 33. Mm-hmm. Moving back down to lightweight. You're given the benefit of the doubt because you think, right, this might be the change in his career that he needed. But I think this goes into a bigger conversation of, what does a fighter need to do to kind of recover their body? As he said, he's done everything else. He was in great shape, and his body gave out on him. He didn't take a massive shot, and he went down a couple of times, and then his shoulder dislocated, and obviously he's got a jaw injury as well. Like that to me sounds like even if he wants to keep competing, he needs like 12 months, 18 months, no contact. And when no one's doing this research right now about, we've said it how many times, his chin's gone. I remember people talking about the same thing with Wanderlei Silva after a couple of knockouts. But I do think there is time for fighters to recover that. We just don't have any information about it. So I think that's, another way that MMA can turn a corner. And unfortunately, Kevin Lee is in that situation where it's a bit of trial and error because the information is not there. But if I was him, at 32, I'd be thinking about taking 18 months off. Focus on my conditioning, focus on my skill acquisition, and not take any impact. Give my head, my body a rest, and then build back into it. But that's easier said than done. We do this as a career, and people need to pay bills as well.
Kevin Lee always struck me as one of those unfortunate people that fit into a 165-pound division. Like, he wasn't quite a lightweight, wasn't quite a welterweight, but he was always kind of like in the middle there with the way that he was built. But I think he hit the nail on the head there. It's interesting as well, though, because Gadzi, like, people are like, well, how good is he? People are saying he's the best free agent outside of the UFC, or like one of the baddest men out there. How do you see him competing with some of the top guys in the UFC? Like, let's say we threw him in there tomorrow against the top contenders or the champions at lightweight. I mean, a lot of people sort of saying, all right, this guy could be like the toughest lightweight out there outside of a couple of these UFC guys.
Every time he gets in there, he impresses me. And I feel like he's realized himself recently. And I don't know whether it was his performances going into the last year's PFL final, where he'd starched a couple of people with his left hook, and he was learning English, so he was a bit more confident speaking for himself, which I do think has made a difference for him. But he says it himself. He realizes that the fans would like to see him more if he starts stopping people. So he's just got his foot on the gas a bit more. He's had a couple of losses. He's not really bothered about that, sorry, compared to the other guys with the undefeated records, that they get a bit precious about that. Gadzi takes some chances. He likes the roll of the dice a little bit more than some of those guys, and that makes him excited. And the reality is he's got the wrestling to back him up if he needs it. But his left hook is a very, very special technique. It's very, very adaptable. And he keeps telling us that his right hand's better. So I expect to see, more from his right hand in the near future as well.
All right. Well, we're going on to PFL 7. We've got PFL 7 in Chicago this coming weekend. And obviously some big names on this card. For those that don't know, we've got some really fun fights. I mean, this goes down on Friday in the States, Saturday in Australia. I feel like people are kind of sleeping on this card because it's International Fight Week, but we've got Fabian Edwards on the card. We've got Phil Davis on the card. We've got Sergio Pettis on the card. Like you mentioned, this event will feature semifinals for the middleweight, light heavyweight, heavyweight divisions. It's in Chicago, which is a fantastic city to do fights in as well. Like, there's a lot going on at PFL 7, right, Dan? People don't realize the depth of this one.
Honestly, it's a fantastic card. I mean, there's a lot of good fights to look forward to in the semi-finals, and then we've got a couple of showcases, in particular the Sergio Pettis Rafael Stotts fight, which is most likely going to determine a challenger for the bantamweight championship. I mean, that in itself is an incredible fight. We've also got Biagio Ali Walsh on the card, who's he's growing in leaps and bounds at the moment. Lightning fast hands, all the rest of his game is developing around. And then we've got, as you said, we've got 3 weight classes with the semifinals. And if you look at those semifinal matchups, the main event, Fabian Edwards, Josh Silveira, you've got Silveira on one side, who he was good at light heavyweight, but he was just not quite big enough. Middleweights is definitely the right division. And Fabian, the championship has evaded him a couple of times against Eblen, but now he's taking on Johnny Eblen's teammate, someone that knows him very well. For me, that's really interesting. But I think we've got a couple of breakout stars on the card. The rematch between Dalton Roster and Aaron Jeffrey. Dalton Roster's saying all the right things. He's wearing all the right suits. He's doing all the right appearances. And if he keeps winning the way he does, and if he gets his revenge in this upcoming fight, he could be, the next star of the PFL. I feel like he's got all of the ingredients. He just needs to figure out if he's dealt with the gas tank issues, which is what handed him his one loss previously to Jeffrey. And then the other fight that really stands out, which is it couldn't be more veteran versus prospect, really. You've got Phil Davis on one side and Sullivan Corley on the other. And Sullivan Corley's got all the wrestling skills potentially to be able to keep Phil Davis on the feet, but he's got some wicked close range striking, and then Phil Davis coming off that brilliant knockout as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot to look forward to. I could go on. I mean, it's a solid card of fighters, and we're gonna have some real good finishes, I think.
You know what I love about it? You guys are, making headway. Things are coming together. 2 more things that I love about the PFL that came out recently. Number 1, the app. You guys have a new app where you can watch the fights and keep in touch with what's going on, which is fantastic. I've got the app, and it just makes it clear about, where do you watch the fights? When are they coming up? You can watch a lot of the fights for free on the app as well, which is fantastic. And the other thing that I wanted to get your thoughts on is Don Davis making it affordable for fans to actually watch live MMA, right? The cost of living crisis all over the world, people being priced out of being able to watch fights live. You guys have capped the price on a bunch of tickets so people can actually go in and enjoy the fights live without paying some of these crazy prices that we see the other major promotions charge. And some of that weird pricing thing where it goes up the more tickets get sold, right? That's pretty good. You guys are bringing fighting back to the fans and making it accessible for them again.
Look, we've got to. I mean, this is something that we've been focused on in Europe as well. We've got this big event coming up in Brussels. Patrick Habarora in the main event. If you've not heard of Patrick Habarora, you need to check him out. You need to watch his finishes. He's a spectacular talent. He's taking on Danny Roberts in the main event for that one. And this is the first time Brussels is going to have a major MMA event. And I just want to make sure that we've got we're filled to the rafters. Any young fans that are interested to come and watch, they can afford to come. That few people can get together and come in a group and watch an event that they've never been to before and become new fans of the sport. We sometimes forget that we're still growing as a sport, and we still got to keep reaching new fans. And ticket prices is a big key for that. Some of the old promotions that I used to fight on when we'd be in an ice hockey rink, and so all of the seats up in the rafters, the tickets would be near nothing, and people would bring a whole bunch of kids to watch and have a good night. I like those kind of events where it feels accessible to people, and a lot of these fighters that we've got have got fans that want to come and support them, and particularly in Brussels, we've got some real local stars on the card that are about to break out, and their fans want to see them live. Paul Hughes, same thing in Belfast. We can't be pricing these fans out of the arena, because they're the ones that carry these fighters forward with that momentum into championships.
Well, man, congratulations. So that goes down on the 5th of July for those wondering. That's the Brussels event. We've got to the Chicago one. That's this Friday in America, this Saturday here in Australia. I believe you can check that out on Stan Sports. And of course, check out the app as well. Make sure you download that so you're in touch with everything that's going on. Congratulations on an incredible job, Dan. You're killing it. Can't wait to see what happens next.